Crash and burn.
Hey everybody. So yeah, tonight I am looking to discuss the very recently released the newest Trailer Park Boys movie, and that is of course Standing on the Shoulders of Kitties, the Bubbles and the Shit Rockers story, which is a mouthful. Admittedly, that's a really long title. And I was concerned going into this because I heard that Bubbles is the focus of the film, and Ricky and Julian, they're not in it as much. And I was sort of like, oh no, like I was hoping that they weren't going to go down the same road as far as the tone was concerned that I found, or at least I felt that they went down with the last movie, and that was 2014's Don't Legalize It. I felt that movie was a little light on the laughs, and it was just a little too serious at times. And it is, for me at least, the least funny of the original 3 Trailer Park Boys movies. And so that's what I thought was going to happen here. Like, I thought they were branching out and doing something really unique. And I know that Mike Smith, or at least I think Mike Smith wrote this. So there was a very big focus going to be on Bubbles and his band. And I'm not really into country. Like, I like some country, but it's not something that I listen to a lot. And I think his band is cool. And like Who's Got Your Belly from the second season of Out of the Park was absolutely awesome. And it was so much fun. But it's not really for me. So I was kind of concerned as to whether or not I was going to be able to connect with this movie. And wow, was I wrong. Like, everything about this movie is amazing. It starts off, of course, Bubbles has set up a home recording studio, and he's decided to call it Tabby Road, which is amazing because it's a nod, of course, to Abbey Road, the studio in London where the Beatles recorded everything, you know. And I thought that was really fun. And I also liked how they managed to make a movie without Leahy, which unfortunately, of course, they had no choice because John Dunsworth has since passed away. And I was a little concerned about that too, but not having Leahy be the bad guy in this, it's okay. Like, you know, because Mayhew's in this. Tom Mayhew, who of course ran their lives into the ground in the first Out of the Park Europe from a ways back. And then he was sort of attempting to run their lives into the ground in the second season where they're Out of the Park USA. But it doesn't quite work as well because they're landlocked to Canada and they can just hitchhike home. So he doesn't quite have as much power over them. But he's in this, and he's sort of the main antagonist of sorts because he's still a complete and total asshole who dominates Bubbles and his band on tour and ends up kicking them off the tour, and it causes this big thing. So not having Leahy in it, which was another concern that I had, it actually doesn't hurt this movie at all. And that's really good. And at the same time, I still think it's incredibly sad that John Dunsworth is no longer around. But I am happy to see that the movie can still stand on its own without him. And the other thing that I really liked about this movie was how it feels like this is like the first independent film made from the Trailer Park Boys universe. And what I mean by that is the first 3 films felt like, in order to kind of get off the ground, they needed to tie directly into the lore of Sunnyvale and the Trailer Park Boys. Like, the movies couldn't exist without the TV show. But what I felt from this was this movie felt like it was able to stand on its own. No stands. They like standing on the shoulders of kitties. Oh, fuck, look at that. Kind of tied it in. But it does. It feels like it can legitimately stand on its own. And it doesn't need the Trailer Park Boys lore in order to sell itself. It just feels like a regular movie. So I loved that as well. I also like how Big Hawk shows up at the start. I love how Mayhew's in this. I love how at the beginning, Ricky believes he's in the Shit Rockers because he's allowing them to rehearse in his trailer. And his song that he kind of comes up with is Luli Luli Chicken, which for anybody that doesn't know, it's a nod to one of the earlier podcasts that the Trailer Park Boys did that they've posted on YouTube. And I believe the episode is called Luli 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 Chicken. And if you're interested, the part about Luli 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 Chicken comes up at the end of the podcast. If I remember, I'll be sure to throw the time up on the screen so you know when to fire to at the end of the podcast if you're interested. Because I'm not big into podcasts myself, but the reason that I really like the Trailer Park Boys podcast is because there's a visual component and I can watch them. I'm not really big into talk radio, but I love being able to see the Trailer Park Boys physical comedy interact with more of their audio-based comedy. And that's why I like the Trailer Park Boys podcasts, because I can see them. And so, yeah, so Ricky tosses in Luli, Luli, Luli Chicken, which is so good. I also like how initially they're touring around after Big Hawk makes the offer to tour around and do a bunch of the legions around, they're driving around in the Dirty Burger, which is cool again because it brings Phil Collins into it briefly, because unfortunately, again, there's another cast member that has since passed away. So I thought that was really fun too. But then the biggest thing about this is all of the people in this. Like Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones is in this. Eric Burdon is in this. Duff from Guns N' Roses, he's in this. Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick, he's in this. And I thought that was really fun too, because that was the other big thing about this movie that I thought was rad, was that there was a real focus on musicianship, because Bubbles and his band, the Shit Rockers, they can really play. And they're, of course, on tour with Billy Bob Thornton and his band, the Boxmasters, and they can really play. And I like how seriously Bubbles takes his music, because, of course, for anybody that doesn't know, Mike Smith has been a long-standing musician, been in a bunch of bands, yada, yada, yada. And if I'm not mistaken, too, Bubbles has gotten to play with Guns N' Roses, as well as Rush, too, because I remember seeing the video on YouTube where he's playing with a couple of the guys from the Bare Naked Ladies and Rush. So I thought that was really fun. And therefore, again, I liked how the musical aspects were treated with a lot of respect. I also loved how they end up back in England. And then now maybe this wasn't intentional, but I like how when Randy goes missing because he's going to suck and fuck his way back to Canada, that Bubbles gets a bunch of like missing posters printed of him, and he's putting them all over. I think they're in Whitechapel. He's worried about being killed by Jack the Ripper. And I liked how they were putting posters everywhere, because for me, it was sort of a throwback to season 7 when Philadelphia Collins was putting up all the missing posters for his son Jacob, because Jacob and the two meat dummies were lost in the forest when they were supposed to be setting up the train tracks for the weed deal with Sebastian Bach from Skid Row. I thought that was nice. So maybe that was intentional. I'm not sure, but I still loved how it tied directly into the past. But again, it doesn't need to. This movie feels like it's not like attempting to imply or sort of employ like member berries or whatever, where it's like, oh, look, you're going to like this movie because we've loaded this movie with a bunch of things from our past, yada, yada, yada. It feels more natural and more organic. Like they threw in the missing posters because they needed to find Randy. And again, I don't think it was necessarily done as a nod to what took place with Philadelphia and Jacob Collins back in season 7. For me, I felt that way. But again, I think I'm probably alone on that. What else did I want to say? Billy Bob Thornton, he is either playing himself or he's playing a version of himself. I'm not entirely sure, but he's hilarious. He has this sort of dry, deadpan sense of humor and delivery with his lines. Like when the dudes spill all the beer on him at the bar when they're in England. He's like, oh, did we get your leg wet? He's like, yeah, just both of them. That type of delivery, which I absolutely love. And I like how Billy Bob Thornton got a really mean look on his face. And so him and Mayhew, they play off each other so well. And really, I felt like him and Mayhew should have had more scenes together, because like I said, they're kind of the same person in that regard. And I felt like they went really well together. What else did I want to say? Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Because they end up at Abbey Road, the real Abbey Road Studios at the end. Billy Bob calls him in for this huge party that he's having there. And Bubbles actually gets to record a song there, like he discusses wanting to at the start of the film. And that's possibly another throwback to the past, because they walk by Abbey Road when they're stranded in England in the first episode of Out of the Park Europe. And so I thought it was kind of cool that they maybe got to bookend things there somewhat. So I thought that was really neat too. What else did I want to say? Actually, you know what? I think that's it. So I am going to leave it there. So like always, thank you so much for hanging out with me for Jesus Christ, like 9-10 minutes while I discuss the Trailer Park Boys' first movie in 10 years. And that is the very recently released Standing on the Shoulders of Kitties, the Bubbles and the Shit Rockers story. Like always, if you like this review, or you like this movie, don't forget to go and do something nice for somebody. It's simple. Hold the door, give $1 to charity the next time you're at Walmart or Target. But most importantly, like always, never forget that the world is actually a better place because you are in it. I'm getting out of here because I'm starting to get hot. Have a good night.